And I think it probably took me about 5 hours to go up. And then it only took me about 3 hours to come down because I was essentially running down the mountain trying to get back before they closed the shower facilities. They did not stay open. My name is Jonathan Ferris. I'm from the USA, from the state of Louisiana, central Louisiana, so not quite New Orleans, but not fully north either. So my hometown is fairly small. It's more spread out than Gwangju, but it's actually a little smaller population-wise. Pineville and Alexandria and the metropolitan area is bigger than this, but it's spread over quite a much larger distance. Alexandria and Pineville are two cities that are separated by a river, the Red River, and Pineville is dry, which means there's no alcohol anywhere available. So people who want to drink, which is a lot of people, will cross the river to get to Alexandria to buy their booze, or they'll go just outside of the city limits, and there it's legal to sell alcohol. So, fun fact, Louisiana was one of the few places where you could get drive-through alcohol in the U.S. There was the Daiquiri Hut was a place in Alexandria where you could drive through, order your margarita, your daiquiri, your mixed drink, and they would give it to you in a styrofoam cup with a piece of the straw paper remaining, so it is a sealed container. And then as long as you got stopped, if you got stopped by a cop, if you had the paper on, you were okay. It's maybe not the best system. Well, I think what I miss the most is probably just access to a lot of different food. Food is important, to I think a lot of cultures, and the same is certainly true for Louisiana. Besides just those Louisiana flavors, I also miss a lot of international foods. It was much easier back home, especially when I lived in Texas for a while before I came here in Austin. If I just wanted any kind of food, I could probably find a restaurant that had it without too much trouble. Yeah, it's harder to do in Gwangju. I ended up in Korea as kind of a last resort. My degree is in pottery, and before I came to Korea for a time, I taught art classes, and I had moved away from Louisiana to Austin, Texas, hoping to get involved in the art scene there. But this was about 2008 when the economy in the US was not doing so great, and it was very difficult to find a full-time job that allowed me to pay my rent in that field. So I started waiting tables instead at a Vietnamese restaurant, which was not terrible, but it was not, fulfilling. And I attempted to get a teaching certificate to become an actual high school art teacher, and the Office of Education, the Department of Education there just was not really interested in getting more art teachers at that time. So that did not work. I overheard one of the regulars at the restaurant talking to some friends about wanting to maybe go to Korea. So when they finished eating and before he left, I stopped him and asked, "Hey, can you give me a little information about what you were talking about?" And he was quite happy to set me up with the recruiter he was talking to. I don't think he ever actually ended up coming to Korea, but I did, and 10 years later, here I am. Well, I wanted to come to Korea because it was my only option, it seemed like, to kind of get out of a dead-end situation. And I thought at the time, I wanted to travel. I really wanted to travel the world since I was a kid, and I didn't have a lot of opportunities prior to that. So I thought, well, it's a great way to travel, and I'll do it for a year if I hate it, because you can do anything for a year and survive. And if I love it, then I'll stay 2 years, and then I'll go somewhere else. Well, that didn't quite happen. I have lived in Korea for over 10 years, 10 and a half years at this point. So sometimes people are surprised when they hear that, and I guess, is 10 years destined for an all-lifer? I don't know, but so far I have not found a reason to leave. So, yeah. That's an impossible to answer question. What immediately pops into my mind is the answer that I've often given when people ask me what surprises you about Korea. And what I have been surprised with is both how quickly Korea can change and how quickly people can adapt to that change. And it seems like people back home, at least in my area, often are a little more reticent to accept change. And although Korea is more traditional in a lot of senses and holds on to tradition, I think, more than a lot of places in the US, people are still very stuck in their ways when it comes to mindset about certain things. And I have seen some of those things will change more easily in Korea than they do back home. I guess other things don't, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. When I came to Korea, I am a vegetarian, and I was a vegetarian when I came to Korea. However, it was very difficult to eat that way at first. I didn't know which foods were going to be suitable for me, and I didn't have a grasp of Korean well enough to be able to ask for special accommodations to be made at places. So in my first year here, I did eat some meat, and I have a story about that. In my first night in my own apartment, I didn't know anything about the city. I was briefly shown by my co-teacher where I could go do some shopping at the GS supermarket down the road, which was very close. It was convenient, but I didn't know anything else. My best friend was in the city somewhere because we came at the same time, but we didn't have internet or phones, so we had no way to contact each other. And I had no idea where he was in relation to my apartment. So I had this tether out there that I couldn't grasp, and I was hungry. So I just walked down to the GS and I got what I thought would be a good dinner, which was like some instant rice and what I thought was hue, right? And like chobap, like that kind of thing. And I took it back to my apartment and I unwrapped everything and I started watching a movie and eating on my laptop, just little desk, little chair. That's all I had. Tiny one room apartment. And I was eating, and the first bite I took of this fish that I thought was suitable to eat raw, pretty much instantly I realized I had made a mistake. And the fish that I bought, I'm pretty sure was supposed to be cooked. There were bones in it. It was not really prepared like chobap would be prepared, I know now. And I was so overwhelmed by this new country, this new experience, and suddenly realizing I am an adult and I don't even know how to feed myself in this country. And I was just so overwhelmed that I slowly just ate bits off of this bony raw fish and just kind of cried and watched my movie. And it was not the best first night, but things could only go up from there, and they did. So it's all right. I didn't really come with any expectations. I didn't know that much about Korea. I did some quick research before I came, but pretty quickly after learning about this opportunity, I got moving and started getting the necessary documents and everything that I needed. So I didn't know very much, and I tried to approach coming to the country, living in the country with an open mind and just kind of accept whatever came my way, and that worked well. It made things enjoyable and new, and sometimes a little more stressful, but not in always a bad way. So has it lived up to my expectations? I guess it surpassed them because I didn't know what to expect, and what I got has been, for the most part, quite nice. Certainly nice enough to keep me here for a long time. Getting used to being an outsider is important. I was kind of a weird kid growing up, so in some ways I was already used to that. It is different when you kind of know that you will always be separate from the society you are living in. No matter what you attempt to do to integrate, you'll never be Korean. So you have to be okay with a sense of not fully belonging. And I think some people are more comfortable with that than others. Being a bearded man in Korea is an interesting experience because there's a lot of, I think, prejudice or preconceived notions about beards, a lot of which come from no firsthand knowledge, since just a lot of Korean men don't have beards. I assume a lot of Korean women don't have beards either. So sometimes before I had such a long beard, I would get questions. It was very short before. And if I said, I've been thinking about growing it out, people might say, oh, but it's dirty. Isn't it dirty? Like, it's not. It's super not dirty. My shower time is almost doubled because, you like shower and you wash your hair, you maybe use conditioner. I do the same thing with my beard. Every time I shower, I'm also shampooing my beard. I put in conditioner. After my shower, then I have like a balm of like oils and things that I'll apply and brush that in. And so it's softer, I think, than a lot of people expect. When I first told my girlfriend I was going to be growing it out, she said, oh, shiro. But then once I started growing it out and she actually felt it, she like ran her fingers through it, she actually really liked it. And she just wanted to do this a lot. Little kids will also look at me strangely. They don't seem to be afraid of it, they're just interested. So when my beard was shorter, students would often look at it and just kind of maybe unconsciously just touch it. And that's fine, if you want to touch it, whatever. Since we haven't had students here in person, I haven't experienced that in a while, but I imagine there would be some students who would want to, give it a tug or feel it. So I have asked similar things to Korean trainees in the past, like, well, but wasn't this a fashion in the past? If there's any thought of it at all with regard to like Korean culture, that's an old thing. That's a thing that people did in history, but we don't do that anymore. And you look at fashion trends nowadays, just imagine any of the boys from BTS with a beard. Something that has consistently impressed and surprised me about life in Korea is how generous some people can be. And I was told, because I had a beard, because I had long hair especially, that some old people might not like me in Korea. Some old Korean people might not like me. I never found that to be the case in my old neighborhood. There were a lot of old people. I used to go for walks and I would just, the little bit of Korean that I didn't know at the time, I would try to use, 안녕하십니까? And they loved it. They just ate it up. And I found, going on hikes especially, you'll get up to the top of the mountain or to some spot along the way, and there'll be a group of older Korean people who are sitting and eating their kimbap and drinking their makgeolli, and they'll just wave you over, say, come share this with us, come have this with us. And, maybe they don't speak any English, and, maybe our Korean is not super great, but they don't care. They just want to share an experience and share their food with us. And that's really cool. That's not something I would expect to experience in the USA. Maybe not as much for my sake, but for the sake of some friends I have and Korean teachers I've known. I do wish that it was easier for new ideas to gain foothold. As I said before, I think Korea can change quickly and can adapt to change very quickly, but a new idea has to reach this kind of threshold, this tipping point. And at that point, then just everyone very quickly will adopt that idea and make those changes. I think it's very hard to get to that point. And I think that's very true in the education system. There's young teachers with some really great innovative ideas that students aren't getting to experience because other people in supervisory positions maybe don't know about those ideas, haven't had a chance to experience the benefit of those things. And I wish it was just easier to get those kinds of new ideas approved. I've changed a lot in my time in Korea. I've become even more progressive than I was in my political and social thought. And I was already, quite far left for my area growing up. But the way I talk has also changed. I never had a very strong accent. Maybe chalk it up to having speech and English teachers for mother and grandmother, or maybe all the TV I watched as a kid. I don't know. But even so, there's pronunciations of words and specific words and phrases that I never would have used before, that I didn't even know before, that now are part of my daily lexicon. Hanging out with English speakers from different parts of the world has really added a lot of new phrases and sayings into my vocabulary that I'm happy to have. It's fun to be able to express myself in other ways. That's a significant way that I've changed, the way I speak, and not just the word choice, but like the way I speak sometimes, because learning to communicate in a way that's effective with someone who might not understand my language has been a very good experience. I think it's given me a lot of communication skills that I maybe didn't have before. I have learned that I am capable of withstanding a good bit of discomfort because, like the story from my first night here, things are typically only bad for so long. And if you can just hold on through that, then hopefully you can have a growth experience from the bad times. And I've learned what some of my limits are. In some cases, they're further than I thought they were. I've learned a lot about the kind of person that I want to spend my life with, now having dated more people and people from different parts of the world. And I think that experience has also helped me learn to be more compassionate and more aware of my own interactions with other people, how my actions affect others, how it can be interpreted or misinterpreted based on the lack of a shared cultural experience. So I guess in some ways I'm a lot more, not necessarily careful, but compassionate about how I communicate. I hope. I've learned that almost paradoxically, America is very insular. America spreads its culture all over the place, and everybody knows about America. And I think a lot of people assume that America doesn't know about the rest of the world. But not just that, I think a lot of America and a lot of Americans don't know how America affects the rest of the world, politically, geopolitically, but also just culturally, how the constant dissemination of American culture affects cultures of other places. I mean, you get lots of great examples of that here in influences on music, on fashion, on movies, and even on language, with lots of Konglish terms that are absolutely not English, but are believed to be English by students and regular people. In my second year in Korea, I think, for my vacation, I went down to Jeju and I took my bike at the time. It was a hybrid bike. It was probably heavier than would have been best, but I took it on the bus down to Gwangju and Mokpo, and then I took the ferry over to Jeju instead of flying, because my idea was that I wanted to get to cycle around Jeju. Well, the ferry got there way later than I was expecting it to get there. And after a day of traveling, I was pretty tired, and I needed to cycle up to the base of Halasan because I was going to camp there and then hike Halasan the next day. That proved to be much more difficult than I expected. I got there too late to use the shower facilities, so I thought, well, I guess I'll just camp and then I'll shower tomorrow. And my bright idea was, well, I'm gonna hike Halasan and come down, so I shouldn't shower in the morning. I'll shower when I get done. Well, Halasan is not a short hike. And I went up, and I think it probably took me about 5 hours to go up. And then it only took me about 3 hours to come down because I was essentially running down the mountain trying to get back before they closed the shower facilities. They did not stay open. A long uphill bike ride, an all-day hike, and no shower in. The next morning I woke up and the showers were supposed to open at like 8 o'clock, and it was like 8:10. I was waiting outside, nothing was there. So I went to the office and just demanded the key. I need you to open the showers for me now. Once I got showered, I decided it was time to cycle in. I was going to go cycle to the lava tubes and go see that. And my bike's brakes were completely locked up. So I didn't have tools to even attempt to fix that myself. So I had to like screech my way back down the mountain into Jeju City to find a bike shop to fix my bike, which took longer than I expected, and I ended up just taking a bus to go see the lava tubes. So overall, it was a nice trip. I still got to like camp on the beach, and I got to hike Alasan, but it was not the experience I was expecting. Korea's got so much to offer. It depends on my mood. Sometimes the best place in Korea is on the side of a mountain looking out at nature. Sometimes it is Itaewon, where I can get some kind of food from a place in the world that I have never visited and have never tried before, but it's wonderful new flavors. Sometimes it is in a noraebang, considerably drunk with friends, all singing together. Oh, I'll miss the food. You know, there's a lot of things I can't eat, but the flavors are still fantastic. I always tell students when I tell them about my home and my culture and the food from Louisiana, I always tell them that I think if they have a chance to try Louisiana food, they'll like it because there are some similar flavors. We use a lot of spice. Korean people are often shocked that I eat spicy food. I love spicy food. Some of the food we have in Louisiana is much spicier than stuff we have here. But like changnyeonggochu, I just eat those things. I love changnyeonggochu. So the thing I will miss absolutely most is the Pyongyang-style naengmyeon at Maehyang across the river. I haven't eaten there since last season, and I am itching for it. They just reopened, and I have to go there like next week, just as soon as possible.